May I welcome you all most warm-heartedly to this historic site, which in its 19th century heyday was romantically known as the Schloss Schönhausen, and which today serves as the beautiful setting for this very precious and unique occasion, the graduation ceremony of the Bard College Berlin class of 2017. My role will be to try to guide you smoothly through this afternoon, and I'm not here to make a speech. But as I know you, and I've even had the pleasure to work with some of you, I wanted to give you a few lines from Rainer Maria Rilke, my favorite, and I wanted to give them on your way, just as a little start. I want to beg you, as much as I can, to be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Resolve to be always beginning. So, now I may introduce our two musicians, Ghaithaa Alshaar and George Saade. Reza plays the oud, George plays percussion, and they will perform Oriental and folk music from Syria, Turkey, and Egypt. I now ask Catherine Toll, Dean of the College, to the podium.
Welcome to the 2017 Commencement Ceremony of Bard College Berlin. This has been a wonderful year for the college, and there are many things to celebrate. Above all, the achievements and the qualities of our graduating class, and the supportiveness of family and friends whom we were delighted to find could join us in such large numbers. No fake news, this is the largest number of guests we have ever had who have traveled from far away to attend a Bard College Berlin graduation ceremony. We also pay tribute to the professors who have guided our students to this point and to the staff of the college for all their hard work throughout the year. I'd like to echo Bendetta's thanks to the musicians and their beautiful overture to the ceremony. Let me now introduce the commencement speaker, Stephan Detjen. It is a testimony to his kindness, generosity, and indeed versatility that he agreed amid a very busy schedule to take up the invitation to address our graduates. You can read in the program some of the details of his varied and distinguished career as a lawyer, a journalist, and an author. Those visiting us for a shorter time may not know that he is one of the leading voices in German public life. His work as chief editor and senior correspondent for Germany's public radio station, Deutschlandfunk, means that he can regularly be heard, fulfilling the rigorous and important task of holding people with influence on public affairs to account and of providing analysis of the most crucial developments of our day. And his work must involve a lot more than that, of which we, its beneficiaries, are unaware. Deutschlandfunk is an amazing resource. To Germans, it probably seems a very normal phenomenon. Maybe they even take it for granted to some extent. But for someone from another country, it seems a daily treasure house of culture, politics, and society. In introducing him as a speaker, I feel prompted to remark that Stephan Detjen's analyses on the radio always sound reassuring, even when they deal, as they must inevitably often do, with events or trends that are rather worrying. This is because of the wonderful precision in the illuminating quality of what he says, and also because of his manner as a person. He has been a great friend to the college and of the goals it tries to pursue, including at a very practical level through the assistance he has offered to the work of individual students. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Stephan Detjen.
That's how it works. Thank you, Catherine, for this very kind introduction. Dear graduates of the 2017 class of Bard Berlin, thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you today. I know it's a very special occasion, and I do know what a big honor the invitation to deliver a commencement speech is in the American academic world. Of course, I know David Foster Wallace's legendary commencement speech to the 2005 class of Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. And if there's anybody in this room who doesn't know it, please feel free to leave right now, take the next 20 minutes and download it from the internet and listen to it. Because this is water, his speech about the difficulty of empathy, the importance of being well adjusted, the essential lonesomeness of adult life, is of so much more wisdom, contains so much more guidance to all of us than whatever I could say in the next 20 minutes. By the way, it was on May 21st as well that David Foster Wallace gave his speech exactly 12 years ago today, 3.5 years before he committed suicide after suffering from a depression for more than 20 years. He left us this amazing, humane speech and some great literature, of course. In Germany, universities, there is no, or at least no long-standing tradition of commencement speeches. I don't know what they do today, but when I left Ludwig Maximilian Universität in Munich with a law school degree and a master in history in the mid-90s, the university didn't do anything to say goodbye or wish us well. One day I found a letter in the mailbox with an in-ornate certificate and the formal notice that I'm exmatrikuliert now, removed from the register of students. Most astonishing for an American audience, of course, they didn't even ask me to donate or to join an alumni association. They never did. I simply didn't hear from them anymore. On the other hand, they didn't need anything from their alumni, of course, because German universities are funded completely by the state, and studying in Germany, at least for European citizens, is free. That's the other side, the other perspective. Nevertheless, maybe that's a German attitude. I feel a certain ambivalence, or at least a risk in being invited to speak to you today. I fear a commencement speech can be a tricky thing, because it may be understood as an invitation for the speaker, advanced in age and career, to celebrate his or her own biography, to justify in retrospect ambivalent decisions and moral choices in the disguise of altruistic guidance for the younger generation. Possible, or maybe even necessary, doubts and discrepancies can easily be skipped. At least the university, I guess, wouldn't invite somebody to be a commencement speaker who has obviously failed in his or her career or messed up his personal life. It might be interesting, though, to hear what an inmate who has spent half a life in prison might have to say to a brilliant bunch of young people like you, or one of the many Berlin taxi drivers whom you would find reading. Does it work better now? I'm a radio man. Or one of the many Berlin taxi drivers whom would you find reading thick books and listen to gentle music at the taxi stand, and who turn out to be of Persian origin, being exiled from their country as young students your age during the Iranian Revolution in 1978 and 79. There are many of them driving taxis in Berlin today. Or what a silent janitor in a school or hospital building, a grumpy official in the Ausländerbehörde, I know many of you had to do with them, the immigration agency, or a long-term unemployed man from Duisburg, Frankfurt an der Oder, or Rostock might say, if we would invite them to take some time, really think about what they could say to you, could be heard by a group of talented, joyful, and curious students who came from all over the world to this place, now taking off for the next steps in a life full of opportunities and hope. Such a commencement speech might end up as a confusing experience. Traditionally, occasions like this celebration are designed to protect you from this kind of irritation. They ideally are intended to encourage students on their way into professional life, but at the same time assume this kind of occasion generally has a stabilizing function in multiple ways. It stabilizes the self-esteem of the speaker, who feels honored, is kindly introduced as he starts to speak. It stabilizes the reputation of the university, at least if they manage to have Steve Jobs, the Clintons, the Obamas, or David Foster Wallace accept their invitation. In this respect, I'm not a big deal for Bard College. And in the end of this mutual agreement of offering and accepting honor, a social order, moral values, and a normative regime in a society is stabilized. Encouragement in a commencement speech may be aimed to stabilization or to irritation. Before I disclose in which direction I will go today, I want to take the opportunity to thank this institution and you, the students of Bard College Berlin, not necessarily for stabilizing my self-esteem today, but for what it meant for me in the past 2 or so years to profit in an indirect but very personal way from all of you. I do not only mean the encounters with some of Marion's students, Marion, who's teaching at Bard College Berlin, listening to Ghaithaa playing the oud at the end of a dinner party with Bard students and faculty I was kindly invited to attend, sharing the amazing Pesach Seder a few weeks ago with Nina's powerful Haggadah, and of course listening to Wafa telling the story of her father who has disappeared in Assad's prisons in Syria. And ever since, I know how proud and grateful the father, any father, could be if he had a chance to hear his daughter speaking about him so lovingly, so sensibly, and convincingly. When I say that I am grateful for Bard Berlin, I mean the joy and inspiration Marion radiated in our home ever since she began teaching at this college. I have seen my wife for years struggling with the different institutions where she has worked, and I saw that if she struggled with something, it never was merely a professional thing. It always ended up at the family dinner table, but I learned that it works in both directions. I remember one evening, she sat down with us exclaiming, "I am in love." Moment of irritation. "I am in love with my students," she added. "I love teaching so much since I found Bard." So, as a husband, I learned that it's quite refreshing to have a happy wife being in love with an institution. Beside this very personal experience with Bard, it touches me deeply whenever I see how many people like you are coming from all over the world to this city, to this country. In particular, I can't stop wondering when I see young Israelis enjoying themselves in this little Tel Aviv they have created in Berlin with Israeli restaurants, cafes, clubs, and art galleries. If there is a thing that can be described as a miracle in recent history, I think it's the fact that 10,000 of young Israelis chose Berlin as the place where they want to live today. And I can't stop thinking about their grandparents who were forced out of Berlin-Mitte, Schöneberg, Charlottenburg, Prenzlauer Berg as kids, or young students, lost their parents in the German camps, devoted their lives to build up the state of Israel because they wanted to create a safe haven for their children and grandchildren. What do they feel, the grandparents feel, about the miraculous changes of directions history took when they hear that their children and grandchildren explain them that they are leaving Israel because Berlin, of all places, promises more safety, more fun, more future? Surveys of the Bertelsmann Foundation found that never before young Israelis had such a positive image of Germany as today, whereas never before have young Germans had such a critical image of Israel. These observations fit in a perception of Germany that I have grown up with as a kid, of what we all call the Alte Bundesrepublik, the old pre-1809 Federal Republic of Germany, in Cologne, the mental heartland of West Germany. My first day of school, the end of World War II, was 26 years ago, exactly the same distance in time between the fall of the wall and the enrollment of our youngest child, Karl, in his elementary school in Berlin. And yet I tend to believe that 1989 was just a few years ago. In the early 70s, the relics of war and the Nazi era were at least as visible in my hometown, Cologne, and in my own family, as the remains of the wall and the GDR in Berlin, particularly here in Pankow today. Ruins and bullet holes in facades were visible. Many places of Cologne, the city was heavily bombed in the war. There were old Nazis in the families and old men with hollow eyes about whom grandmothers and aunts whispered that they have gone through something in the East and nobody would tell exactly if they have been starving in Russian POW camps or serving in German concentration camps, or maybe both. So the starting point of German post-war history was still in sight for my generation. And from that perspective, the story that followed looked to me, exactly like it was physically presented in the architecture of the Museum of the History of the Federal Republic of Germany in its former capital, Bonn, as a pathway through the exhibition that starts in a dark basement and climbs up to higher and higher, brighter and brighter levels of the building. There are some detours, some dead ends, some obstacles to be conquered, but in general, it's an amazing story of political, economical, and moral success. I know that this is definitely not the full truth. The success narrative of German post-war history needs irritation, questioning, and objection. And yet it seems as if more than ever, exactly this narrative of our history is confirmed by the perception of this country from abroad. The fact of your presence in Berlin, as I described it, adds further to this stabilization of this self-perception. I know that you all have a highly differentiated perception of life and politics in this country, but as a journalist traveling with the Chancellor and other German politicians abroad, I am sometimes worried by the expectations I see directed toward Germany and Angela Merkel in person, who often is not only mistaken as the only one and only leader of Europe, but also is hailed and was hailed as the leader of the free world after Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. I fear these perceptions are not only wrong, but will inevitably create disappointment and frustration. On the other hand, I have to acknowledge that Germany, beside its wealth and the fact that we won the Soccer World Cup, is a place of extraordinary social and political stability. I will spend the next month covering the campaigns for the federal parliamentary election, and I won't stop telling my audience in the National Public Radio and Deutschlandfunk that it is an important choice they have to make on September 24th, but compare it to the choices the Americans, the French, the Dutch, the Polish, and the Austrians had to make in their last national elections. Merkel versus Schulz is nothing like Clinton versus Trump, Le Pen versus Macron, Rutte versus Wilders, or Van der Bellen versus Hofer. There are many explanations why the divide in the German society and the disruption in politics are not as deep and as advanced as in other countries. And one obvious explanation, of course, is that Germany already has made some of the destructive but learning experiences other nations may still have to face in the near future. There has been a political and moral waterproofing in Germany that effectively protected some basic elements of democracy and humanitarian principles until today. A part of this waterproofing is the creation and protection of institutions that work as early warning systems for attempts to undermine the fundamentals of democracy as barriers against aggressors and stabilizing ballast when the ship encounters heavy seas. Wherever we see democracies in peril these days, we see that the fundamental institutions of an open society are under fire. And it's not the strong institutions, the parliaments, the army, the police, that are under attack, but the sensitive and vulnerable ones, the Supreme Courts, the media, the universities, like the Central European University in Budapest these days. This, of course, is a pattern we know from the history books. That's why Timothy Snyder, in his book on tyranny, a field manual for Democrats and defenders of open society in times like this, writes as number 2 of 20 lessons from 20th century, protect institutions. Of course, institutions have a double face, and here we come to the issue of stability again. They are stabilizing factors in a state and society, and we praise them today if they function to protect the fundamental principles of a liberal society. But we all know as well that the same institutions can also work as instruments of oppression, exclusion, brakes on progress, suppression of change, and, talking about the media, as amplifiers for hate and division in societies. I believe that which phase of an institution we are confronted with depends on what is happening inside the institution, particularly if it comes to those which I mentioned as the most vulnerable ones: Supreme Courts, media, universities. They, like no others, need to be places of free and undisturbed deliberation, spaces where your thinking can always change directions, safe havens for intellectual experiments and adventures. In this capacity, these institutions need protection and stability. And if they are stable institutions in this sense, they can be motors of change, triggers of irritation. I have seen some institutions living up to these expectations. We are trying to do so as journalists in our radio. Definitely, in my opinion, the Supreme Court, the German Supreme Court in Karlsruhe, and I started my journalistic career as a Supreme Court correspondent in Karlsruhe, the Supreme Court is such an institution, and if I was to fall in love with an institution, it would be the German Supreme Court. While I was thinking about this speech in the last few days, I read John Williams' novel Stoner. I have rarely read a book as intense in its dedication to the most essential truth of human existence, and it taught me a lot about love, teaching, and about the university as an institution. Some of you may have read it earlier. It was published first in 1967, and some 2,000 copies were printed. Few people and media took notice of the book until it was rediscovered and praised as a literary sensation in 2006, 10 years after the death of the author John Williams. The New Yorker then called it the greatest American novel you have never read. The book tells the story of a man, William Stoner, who was born at the end of the 19th century on a small farm in the middle of nowhere in Missouri. Though, as a young man, he was expected to work on the farm and take over from his father, one day he ends up in college, and instead of studying agriculture, he develops a passion for literature, finally becoming a professor at his university. The author introduces Stoner as a man with a low academic profile, few friends in the faculty, someone to be rarely remembered after his death, definitely not a kind of an academic who would be picked by deans or presidents of universities to deliver speeches that increase the public image of the university. Stoner's life may seem like a biography full of disappointments, missed opportunities, sadness and failure. But when you read this book, you will discover an essence of life beyond the surface of a curriculum vitae. It is a book about a profound love for literature and teaching in a university. It depicts a university as an institution that at the same time is oppressive and excluding on one hand, and on the other hand, creating and protecting the social and intellectual space in which Stoner is able to exist as a loving teacher and human being. If you didn't read this book, and if you didn't leave this room before because you already knew David Foster Wallace's This Is Water, but haven't read John Williams, don't leave now, but get to a bookstore as soon as possible. Read this book. This is the encouraging part. This is the encouragement I wanted to deliver today. I know that this place, Bard College Berlin, is a place where love and passion for teaching and learning is possible. It's a treasure. May it be a source of inspiration for you and of irritation, questioning, and objecting for us in Berlin and in Germany And the last encouragement to you is protect this small university in Berlin. Congratulations. I wish you all the best.
Now, after this very beautiful commencement speech, I would like to ask Salome and Andy to deliver the student address.
Okay, so I'll start it off. Greetings on behalf of the Economics Department.
We have 100% representation on the stage, by the way.
So I wanted to try and make my speech sort of a reflection on the post-thesis condition that I've been finding myself in since April 7th. So here we go. Yesterday was the 4-year anniversary since I found out that I was coming to Berlin. This being unbeknownst to me, Facebook's digital intervention helped to spur more bouts of nostalgia that have come to define this post-thesis period. I knew so little about BCB then, Berlin too. Well, save the blanket recommendation from the study abroad advisors that we shouldn't join in protests. Of course, this was because I never originally intended to spend my 4 years here, starting as a beginning Berlin student. However, I came and I quickly found myself at home here, in our unconventional, close-knit family. The way in which we could pick up wherever we left off. The moments of inspiration that I felt when you see the flashes of brilliance in people's eyes when they've discovered an argument in the text, or something just clicked. It's moments like these that I think of our first semester. Well, let me revise that. I think of my haphazardly realized first semester of the Plato course. Specifically, I'm always brought back to the final lecture. It was a guest lecture that was tying up the loose ends of the course. The content spanned from the Iliad all the way through Book 10 of the Republic. We traversed from the Homeric to the Platonic tradition, and somewhere along the way, we found ourselves as Achilles, the warrior on the edge, with his marginal space for choice, blasting through the cave to find ourselves in a newly cultivated realm. We who saw the deep, the walls of our cities, and then found ourselves on the outskirts of the reality and truth we once knew. #Gilgamesh. We may have marginal space for choice, and indeed, for some it may be more marginal than for others. But you must always search for your capacity, fight to establish your foothold in your future, realize the agency you have and the way in which you can direct your lives. When you act, you make a decision, and as Aristotle teased this apart, we can make deliberated decisions or move forward in whichever way conforms to the movement, which is also a decision. And I know that all of you will achieve great things, but you must set your minds to it and find your path. Make deliberate decisions. You will be the ones who will instill the value in your lives. For some, this may have felt like an impasse, for others a stepping stone. But I would like to thank you all, my classmates, for making this one of the most enlightening experiences that I have had. Through the travails, the spirals, the ups, the downs, the sweetness, the bitterness, the B+ best work of the semester with no comments for improvement, I didn't really see that in the text rebuttals. You have demonstrated your strength of character and your mental endurance. Through collective action, you have produced change. So right now, I guess this is where I'm going to give my shout-outs. Shout out to my Carries, Carrie Byström for always having an open ear and heart, and Carrie Bradshaw for making my senior year saucy. An Silke, die mich mit ihrer wunderschönen Lebensperspektive inspiriert hat. To Michael Weinman, whose enduring faith and impatience with us proved to provide one of the most conducive environments for my personal growth. To my Michael for your unwavering support and sincerity and being a rock for me in my times of need. To my family for being available and understanding and instilling so many of my fundamental skills and values. And I'd like to do something that many of us do not experience so much. I'd like to give you positive affirmation. You are strong, you can critically think, you can decide. You will find your own success. You have moved the people around you with your thoughts and words. You have affected change in the environment around you. You can achieve and prosper. You are imprinted on my heart and will always be a friend of mine. Congratulations. Ich wünsche euch nur das Beste.
Thank you, Andy. Okay. When something life-changing happens, and I mean even those life-changing events that we expect, the awareness that it is indeed happening does not come over a period of time or in stages. No. It is usually that the one moment when it hits you, this is truly happening. When it hit me that I was finishing this 4-year journey and was about to embark on a new stage of my life, I was at work. As a part of my student job here at Bard College Berlin, I worked quite a bit on alumni affairs. One day, I was asked to make a new Excel sheet in our alumni database, which would include the names and the contact information of the graduates of class of 2017. When I was completing this task, typing in the names of the people I have known for 4 years, the people I have created so many memories with, that's when the realization hit me, that this is it, that we are graduating, and it almost took my breath away. The years I have spent here at Bard College Berlin have been some of the happiest and most memorable. One of my reasons initially for choosing this institution was its cultural diversity, and I'm speaking about the student body, about the administration, and about the faculty. And I really wanted to become a part of that kind of environment. 4 years later, and personally I can say that I have friends in every corner of the world. I think this is a sentiment we all share. And let me tell you that there are very few other things in my life that have made me feel this enriched. Another reason for my choice was that the intimate academic environment that this college, very unlike other institutions, offers. The education here is multifaceted, developing the knowledge and the skills of the students in every imaginable direction. I acquired personally some skills I never thought I was even capable of having. For instance, I learned visual analysis of artworks. Thank you, Jeff. And I also learned to love mathematics again. Thank you, Martin. And I have by now read entirely too many Arthurian romances, and if I invest in reading the Republic a couple more times, I think I might start quoting the specific lines from specific pages from the specific books, like Michael did in our first semester. Speaking of the first semester, I remember us then, that first meeting we had in the common room of 15 with Zoltan, where he read out all our names, and we had to answer to confirm that we were there. I remember the shy way all our eyes darted around the room and each other, semi-afraid of this journey we were starting. I also remember the first time we decided to go out for an evening in Berlin, more than half of us, admittedly me at the top of that list, afraid that we were going to get lost somewhere in the middle of the city, and get lost we did. I remember walking around in a group of 20-odd people, which is kind of strange for Berlin, trying to find a bar. And we were only going to Mitte on M1. I had a conversation with a friend about Bard College Berlin a while ago. We're discussing how this is a place where people with different backgrounds, all kinds of backgrounds really, come together. And we were questioning, what is it that brings us together all the way to Berlin Pankow every single day? And she said, well, clearly it is something we all share, the natural curiosity to know more, to understand aspects of life, of various areas of knowledge that some people never even think to question. She was completely right, I think. And I know that right now, not all of us are completely sure what we will do, where we will end up, and that is okay. Because uncertainty is the part of life that makes it interesting. What I do know without doubt is that no matter what, as long as we are curious, as long as we are open to learning more, and as long as we are ready to pose questions, we'll be valuable members of any society we decide to become a part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome and Andy. James Harker, Professor of Literature and Rhetoric. Thank you.
I've had the chance to work with the whole graduating class this year in the senior thesis colloquium. These projects took us from Berlin to Benin, Kerala to postmodern Hollywood. They talked about the big ideas: austerity, education, neoliberalism, the subject. And they have made the faculty very proud. And yet, we just can't get out of the habit of assigning reading. So we leave each of you with a gift. And I'm just waiting for my assistants here. For Oscar Becher, from his advisor, Matthias Hurst, Flicker, Theodore Roszak. For Charlotte Boccone, from her advisor, Laura Scuriati, we have Underground Film, A Critical History by Parker Tyler. For Lisanne Boshuizen, from her advisor, Jan Volker, we have A Voice and Nothing More by Mladen Dolar. For Andrew Butler, from his advisor, Dirk Entz, the longest book, Freedom from Fear, The American People in Depression and War, 1929 to 1945. For Osman Chaudhry, from his advisor, Tracy Colony, we have Technics and Time, Bernard Stiegler. For Bisera Jundeva, from her advisor, Jeff Lehman, we have the collected poems of Wallace Stevens. For Nikita Ermiev, from his advisor, Eva Atanasov, we have Marxism, Fascism, and Totalitarianism by James Gregor. For Philip Ottenoyer, from Michael Weinman, we have The Fold, Leibniz and the Baroque, Gilles Deleuze. For Nan Hemmingson Barron, from her advisor, David Hayes, we have Zlate the Goat and Other Stories by Isaac Bashevis Singer. For Sophie Hornoy, from her advisor, Catalin Mackay, we have Pursuits of Happiness, Stanley Cavell. For Talia Krakauer, from her advisor, Matthias Hurst, we have The Empty Space, Peter Brook. For Isabella Lee, from her advisor, Asma Abbas, we have In the Wake of Blackness and Being, Christina Sharp. For Rhea Matthew, from me, we have only this card. Because the perfect book for Rhea will be published in 3 weeks, and that is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, Arundhati Roy. So coming soon. For Ken Rinaldi, we have from his advisor, Deleuze's Cinema Books, David Deemer. For Agnes Sandström, from her advisor, Aya Soika, we have Collecting, Ordering, Governing, Anthropology, Museums, and Liberal Government by Tony Bennett. For Benjamin Chivo, from his advisor, Matthias Hurst, we have Postmodern Theory and Blade Runner by Matthew Flisfelder. And finally, for Salome Vacheshvili, from her advisor, Martin Binder, we have Economics Rules, The Rights and Wrongs of the Dismal Science by Danny Broderick. Congratulations to you all.
So this part of our ceremony is called the charge to the graduates. It sounds like it might be some kind of euphoric stampede in the direction of the graduating class, but no, it means the issuing of a task, the articulation of a responsibility or an imperative to the graduates as they go out there into the world with all their talents and achievements. When I was thinking about what to say to our graduating class, the first thing that came to my mind was a comment made by a 20th century philosopher on a famous phrase from the work of Immanuel Kant. Kant says that there are two things that fill the mind with increasing admiration and awe, the more often and the more steadily they are reflected upon. The starry heavens above me, he says, and the moral law within me. Our 20th century philosopher is also filled with wonder on contemplating this phrase, not because he agrees with it, but because he is astounded that anyone could ever say it. Do we really feel like this today, he asks? Don't we rather feel, when we look at the vast universe, that we are in the middle of a huge construction site, surrounded by various nebulae, with one funny little corner, the one we live in, that has always been compared to a watch that someone forgot? I think these lines came to my mind because they seemed like a verbal snapshot of the cosmos that our graduates might like. And not only because of the strong interest some of them have in what is called continental philosophy. It seemed like a cosmos that they could get on board with, absurd but enchanting, prodigious but in the making, left to its own devices, but still ticking over, continuing. It turns out that the lines appear in a discussion of the whole genre of the charge or the imperative, and the fact that it never means what the person uttering it or the person listening to it thinks it might mean, even if their assumptions are different. If there is anything I can say on behalf of the professors collectively to you as a group, it is simply that we'll miss you. We'll be sorry not to have you around next year. So instead of a charge and the elements it usually contains, let me offer you two further observations, which are also quotations from other people. A charge to graduates usually includes some reference to the state of the world they enter. In this connection, I'm afraid that I thought of some lines from a book published in 1941 by Rebecca West, entitled Black Lamb and Grey Falcon, A Journey Through Yugoslavia. The book tries to understand the deep roots of modern European political history, especially the First World War and the lead up to the Second. Among the events on which it reflects is the assassination in 1898 of Elizabeth, Empress of Austria. The newspapers reporting on this event described her assassin, Luigi Lucchini, as mad. West agrees that the declared rationale for his action was nonsensical and that his violence brought no benefit to anybody, but still she attributes to it a certain meaning. Lucchini, she tells us, came from an urban population for which the existing forms of government made no provision, which wandered without work and without traditions, without the power to control its destiny. Vienna, the Empress's home, was, she says, the archetype of the great city which breeds such a population, its luxury financed by a ruthlessly exploited underclass. West considers Lucchini's action to have been a question put to the symbol of power, the question, what are you going to do with me? Later, she says, his like found a vocabulary and a name for themselves and astonished the world with the farce of fascism. You may or may not consider this passage, with its reference to an empire in its last phase and a purely destructive oppositional force, to be resonant. But the at once imaginative and analytic sympathy and concern of its author certainly resonates with the work of our students. Among the class of 2017, Bard College Berlin has its first graduates in the social sciences, social scientists with a liberal arts education who have shown their commitment to investigating the causes of the conditions under which people live. Among their ranks also are activists who have been tireless and creative in their engagement with the demands and the needs of the world around them. And we have, sometimes these are all the same people, of course, connoisseurs and interpreters of culture and of its double face, as at once a document of civilization and a record of barbarism. The third and final observation is a wish for your future. It's from a more recent work, a work of fiction published in 2015 by a well-known writer. Early in this book, the main character talks about a 19th century novelist on whom he wrote a thesis. But the lines also seem to be one of those moments that sometimes occur in literary texts where the author appears to address us directly, to step out of the fictional plot he or she has created, to talk to us about literature and what it is. And this writer says the following: the beauty of an author's style, the music of his sentences, have their importance in literature, of course. The depth of an author's reflections, the originality of his thought, certainly can't be overlooked. But an author is above all a human being, present in his books. And whether he writes very well or very badly hardly matters, as long as he gets the books written and is indeed present in them. It's strange that something so simple, so seemingly universal, should actually be so rare, and that this rarity, so easy to observe, should receive so little attention from philosophers in any discipline. For in principle, human beings possess, if not the same quality, at least the same quantity of being. In principle, they are all more or less equally present, and yet this is not the impression they give at a distance of several centuries. We can keep the male pronoun in this quotation because it's a sentiment that obviously can't be universalized. No professor could endorse the idea that it is a matter of indifference whether one writes well or badly. It is certainly better to write well, as our graduates can do. But about presence, he may have a point. I think that a group of students who have read some of the more difficult and challenging works at a distance of several centuries and more would agree on the importance of such presence. It's also something they show in everything they do. And I wish that they continue to possess and guard that quality. And also, don't forget to write, not just to us, your professors, to keep in touch, but at the beginning of the day, at the end, whether well or badly, it really helps. And the reason I've talked to you through the observations of other people is also to remind you that no matter how things go, you can always draw on the sustenance of the kinds of things you read here, on the words of people who have written before you. And finally, let me express my thanks on behalf of the professors and the college to your families and friends, and our congratulations to all of you. You have all our good wishes and support for the future. We now proceed to the awarding of the diplomas.
May I welcome Susan Gillespie, Vice President and the Founding Director of the Institute for International Liberal Education at Bard College in Annandale, and Carrie Bystrom, Associate Dean of Bard College. Then we'll start. Oskar Becher. Charlotte Boccone. Lisan Mayen Boshuizen. Andrew John Butler. Muhammad Osman Ali Chaudhry. Visera Chundeva. Nikita Eremeyev. Philipp Benjamin Euteneuer. Nan Athena Kaiser Hemmingsen Baron. Geoffrey Hornioy. Talia Zoe Krakauer. Isabella Lee. Ria Ann Matthew. Ken Rinaldi. Agnes Sandström. Benjamin Chivo. Salome Facevili.
So that was the main event. For those of you who might not be quite so familiar with how some things work, I am from Bard Annandale, as we like to say, from the mothership. And the diplomas that I gave to you were those American diplomas. And of course, many of you also received a German diploma. We are very proud of you. We're proud of being in Berlin. We're proud of what all of you, your faculty, and all of your co-workers are accomplishing here. And we have enormous hopes and expectations from you. We hope, of course, that you are also proud of what has happened here, and that we'll continue to feel that way about each other. We have among these 17 students, it seems like a big number to some of us, a lot of you on stage. Among the 17 students, we have represented 10 countries. We have parents here today, and I want especially to welcome the parents from the United States, from Russia, from the United Kingdom, from the Netherlands, from Hungary, from India, from Singapore, and Sweden, and Georgia. Have I missed anybody? No, it's quite fabulous and very unusual. We have this great wealth and riches and diversity, not only geographically, but also economically, also in terms of the interests that our students bring to this college and to each other, and to the creation of relationships and habits of mind that we hope will carry you through what promises to be a very interesting time at the least. I want to take a minute to encourage everyone here to read the titles of the senior projects, which are printed at the back of the program. They will give you a little sense of the kinds of questions, the kinds of explorations and voyages, I guess, that this group of graduates has undertaken already. Each of them has finished a major piece of work, sometimes comparable to a master's thesis, engaged deeply with the help of a faculty member, perhaps several faculty members, certainly also with the help of each other, in going deeply into something that they chose, that you chose, and that interests you in particular. That should serve you well as you go forward to work in whatever fields you wind up working in. Just want to make a couple of quick comments about the moment in which we find ourselves. I realized a little while ago that we're about to have the 2020s. We'll have our 20s, which, like the 20s of the 1920s, is a time of conflict, of danger, of great originality in the arts and literature, but we know what followed the 20s. Right? The 20s were followed by the 30s. And these next coming 20s will also be followed by a 30s, which we hope will not be a repeat of the 30s that we know about here in Berlin. I'm impressed actually today by how much history we've thought about together. And of course, the history of 100 years ago may or may not repeat itself. Some things have changed and are changing quite a bit. Technology is changing. The fact that you all can be here studying together, staying together in whatever ways, perhaps with the use of technology, is something that wouldn't have happened in those 20s and 30s. So there's a promise in the changes that we all see, and also some dangers. As I look around the world of intellectual dialogue, I guess, I come across concepts like post-humanism, transhumanism, ways in which people expect algorithms to take the responsibility for decision increasingly out of our hands. I don't think that has to be, but I think these are some of the issues that you all, with your familiarity with the technologies and your interest in these questions, will be dealing with. As I was reading through the lists of the senior projects, I came across one in particular that I wanted to mention to all of you. There's several actually about studying and about writing. That was encouraging to me because it shows a deep interest in education, which is, of course, essential for any society to maintain its ties with the past and its chances for the future. The one I will read is Welcome to the Anthropocene. What next? Technics, life, and the question of a future. This question of a future is perhaps the most important question that we all are asking right now. We look to you, and here I can go back to the beginning of today's ceremony, to live with the questions, to live the questions. I hope you will continue to invite us in, inform us about the answers or partial answers that you may find. We need you, we rely on you, we remain proud of you and hopeful, and we look forward very much to everything that you will accomplish and change or keep the same, and be good to each other and be good to this place. Congratulations again.
Well, graduates, spread your wings. This is the end of the ceremony. We'll invite you all very warm-heartedly to celebrate with us in the Wintergarten. Thank you again all for being here.